If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good. Wasn't Jeffrey just amazing again?
John, I mean, I remember how blown away we both were the first time we talked to Jeffrey Hollander about a year ago, but geez, I can't wait to have him back a third time.
I know. He's just one of those type of great thought leaders. And, you know, if you were inspired by Jeffrey Hollander, you got to wait for our next guest, because when we come back from this commercial, we've got David Levine from the American Sustainable Business Council here at Green is Good.
If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, to the New York edition. We're so excited to have on the line with us from New York, David Levine, who's the co-founder and executive director of the American Sustainable Business Council. Welcome to Green is Good, David.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. Really appreciate the work that you're doing on this show here.
Well, we're just thrilled to have you on. We want to learn, and we want our listeners to learn more about the American Sustainable Business Council. Tell us when you founded this organization and why it was originally founded.
Well, it was founded officially in 2009, in early 2009, and what it came out of was that a number of sustainable business leaders, businesses of all different sizes, small, mid-sized, larger businesses, were called to meet with the Obama-Biden transition team to present some of the forward-thinking ideas that this community of green businesses, sustainable businesses, local living economy businesses, micro-enterprises. So there's a lot of words out there sort of describing a new frame of business that is really about looking, how do we balance the search and achievement of profits, financial stability, along with doing good in the world, along with both the environmental and the social aspects of what we need. We have a healthy communities and healthy planet, but healthy businesses as well. So this new set of businesses that have been out there practicing this different way of doing business has been growing and growing in this country. So in essence, what happened was, out of this meeting, we looked around and said, this voice has been missing from the conversations around public policy. This voice has been missing in the media. Normally, when we have conversations around the direction that this country should be moving in, you have voices from the non-governmental organizations, the nonprofits, environmental groups, health groups, and they say, here's what's good for people. Here's what's good for the communities. You have other groups that are going, here's what's good for the earth. And then normally what happens is those conversations get cut short because at the end of it, it says, oh, sorry to tell you, this is bad for business. But what hasn't happened is that there hasn't been a hard search on Capitol Hill or in the media for, well, is that all business that believes that? Is that all? No. And so what we did was we recognized that there was a missing voice, presence, and power in the conversations around public policies. So we brought together, a number of different business organizations that were articulating the need for this engagement of business around public policies to support what we're calling a vibrant and equitable, a sustainable economy, and to engage in the education, in the public dialogue, and particularly in the movement of policy to help us move in that direction. We started with 6 organizations. Today it's 28 member organizations representing 75,000 businesses across the country.
Wow.
So it's been an incredible growth in 1 year's time, with tremendous receptivity, from the business community, but also on Capitol Hill, from the White House, from media as well, beginning to understand that they can actually have another set of opinions, ideas, strategies for how to rebuild the economy, how to rebuild society, and that it's important to have business at the table, but there are a different set of players that have a different set of perspectives on this. as represented by the many members that we have in the American Sustainable Business Council.
And you have tremendous credibility at this. You're not just some wonderful and brilliant, highly educated tree hugger. You yourself have been a social entrepreneur for over 30 years. You're the founding partner of Green Harvest Technologies. You've directed sustainable economies. So you've really lived on both sides of the fence here.
Right, and that's, I think, a key part of the whole team that we've put together here and the organizations that we're representing. What they said is key is that it's really time to sort of, break down a lot of the traditional barriers that we've had in the way that we've engaged in policy discussions. So, whether, you like the scene or not, when President Obama was addressing all of our elected officials there, Republicans were sitting next to Democrats. That's one of the divides that we have in the country. And what we're saying is that the voice that we bring is not just Democratic, it's not Republican, but it's a business case for why we believe that a sustainable economy is a direction to move in. And so what that means is that we definitely need the business voices at the table. So when we're talking about what's the right thing to do in this country, forging those relationships with the health groups, the environmental groups, the social justice groups, that's important as well. We need to help them to understand that, if we're about rebuilding the country, you got to have businesses at the table. And many of them are starting to understand that if we're formulating these policies that are good for the planet and good for people, that they need to be good for profit as well as represent having business at the table to help, develop that is an important component.
Well, David, now I may be jumping ahead of things a little bit, but, in inviting business to come to the table here, part of the pushback might be, well, look, it's going to cost us too much money to retool, to reinvent ourselves. Is part of the solution that the American Sustainable Business Council offers? Are there templates that you're willing to help offer to business to show them how to make that transition? Because the three parts of sustainable business are people, planet, and profits. And Lord knows, no business can keep going if it's not making a profit. It's a question of, okay, we've gotten used to making this much profit at the end of the year. We don't want to lose on that. How do we become environmentally responsible and maintain this level of profitability, or even hopefully increase it? Is that part of the solution that you bring to business, inviting them in?
Quite right. You've hit it. And in part we're doing that in a number of different ways. As we approach each of the different issues in the campaign areas, policy issues, and the like, it's really to take a look at it and articulate what's the business case for moving ahead here. So on that larger policy level, so for instance, if you look at the work around chemical policy, chemicals are in every sector of our economy, right? Chemicals to materials to products. That's the basic line. And so the policy that we've had in place is the Toxic Substances Control Act. When we look at that, it's been an ineffectual piece of policy, but came on the heels of the Clean Air and Clean Energy Act. So we looked at that from our, through our business eyes, and along with many others out there that recognize that these many years later, that law wasn't going to be able to help us grow our business in the forms that we needed to, because we didn't have a coherent, transparent, usable policy in place to guide the way we use chemicals in this country. So as we looked at it, to get back to the point about the cost of doing business, we looked at what happens to an individual business that's out there selling a particular product. What they have to do is they have the expense of working with hazardous chemicals and toxic chemicals. Instead of looking towards green chemistry and sustainable materials, they have costs that they have to build into doing business. So, you have to take the precautionary measures for your employees if you're dealing with hazardous chemicals. Two is you have to figure out how you're going to dispose of this in a safe manner, and those have costs. You have to have the proper insurance, because the liability the liabilities of exposure either to your workers or to those that are using the products at the at that part of the life cycle. Those have impact. So if you look at asbestos, the number of lawsuits, the billions of dollars that have been spent on trying to remediate the problems that people, the health problems that people have encountered because of exposure to asbestos from the workers to communities and the like, is phenomenal. I mean, imagine if you could have reinvested that back into the economy to grow green businesses, sustainable businesses. So those costs are real. The impact on workers, right, dealing with is the health impacts. So the number of lost days, sick days from that, the health insurance costs that drive up. So what we're saying here is there are tremendous costs that are there, and then you add the planning. So as consumers become more and more aware of the relationship between toxic chemicals, and the products that they're using, you've seen major shifts in the marketplace, like around bisphenol A, right, found in baby bottles, in food can linings and the like, major shifts away from use of a number of those different products. Industry had to adapt. They had to adapt and quickly around that, and those costs of not being able to sort of plan around that, but responding to a public drive as opposed to a public policy that would use some good scientific criteria for how to look at these things, those have real-world costs. And again, I can go on and on about the costs associated and the benefits then of looking to the new markets, the new product categories, the possible transition, which in a lot of cases does not require a total retooling, but a total refocusing. Those are the opportunities not only for reinstilling confidence in our consumer markets here in this country, but about tapping the international markets as well, because countries throughout Europe and in other places around the world are instituting chemical policies. Our products won't be able to play alongside the other companies that are stepping up to meet the criteria found elsewhere. So at that policy level, it's quite clear to us that driving, on from a more sustainable perspective makes good economic sense. For those individual companies that want to move in this direction, a number of our member organizations provide those kinds of consulting services. We have case studies that we could point you to of, companies that have been doing this from small, medium, and large. But there's a lot of growing number of companies and consulting services that are out there these days to help one move in a direction that would be catered and suited to their particular industry and their particular business. So you can get it at that level of your specific business, but we also have that articulation, and that's really where our work falls, is really how to make economic sense of these policies, and this is making a lot of sense to us across the board. And as you look at new sectors, you can see where that work needs to be, take place, and where it's going to make good economic sense, and therefore be a different way, a new paradigm for how we look at our economy.
Hey, if you just joined us right now, we're so honored to have David Levine on the phone with us. He's the executive director of the American Sustainable Business Council. You can look up his great work and look up the council at www.asbcouncil.org. David, who are some of the groups and businesses that are involved with your great work and the council, and what issues today? It's a new year. It's 2011. The State of the Union just happened. What's your State of the Union? What issues are burning right now on your heart and mind and your board's heart and mind, and what are you tackling this year and beyond?
Well, great. well, first to give you a sense of the membership, then you have groups like the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, which is a lot of the sensibilities around buying local. Right. That comes out of the work that this group is doing around the country. So you'll find pockets in every corner of the country. You have groups like the Association for Economic Opportunities, which is really helping to drive micro-enterprise. Those businesses smaller than 5 people. But when we look around at micro-enterprise and small business, that's where most of the jobs have actually been created in this country. And the numbers fluctuate from 70 to 85% of the jobs that have been created in this country over the last number of years. Those are by small and mid-size and even micro enterprise businesses. Parts of our group are also the Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility and other groups in regions around the country like South Carolina, Small Business Chamber of Commerce,
Gotcha.
Fay Penn Economic Development Council. So these are groups that are forming in states. The Fay Penn is in Pennsylvania, right? So from Pennsylvania to South Carolina to Vermont. So groups in their states or in their regions that have come together and recognized as local chambers, as local associations of businesses, that what the work that the council is doing is much more in alignment with the direction that they want to move in than the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or some of the other organizations. This is an opportunity, that is much more in line with their individual business members.
Hey, let's talk about that for a little bit. The council versus the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. What is the differentiating factors between both of them? We talked a little bit about that on the first half of the show with Jeffrey Hollander, and he gave us a good analysis. What's your analysis? Is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce really there to maintain the status quo, and you are really right now one of the most progressive sustainability organizations in the United States?
Well, it says, so for us, in part, and, we have different members that fall out in different places on it. But, in general, we looked at, and as others have done lots of research on this, is, for instance, the fact that the U.S. Chamber, 16 companies provided over a third of their funding. So the way that they've sort of moved on this, and we saw what a big influence that had in the last election, right? With the Citizens United case. So when we go back to campaigns and talk about that, that's an important one then, about the ability to sort of move large amounts of money, undisclosed, not transparent, into the elections is a big concern of ours. But in general here, the positions that they held,
right,
on climate,
right,
have been of concern to us. The positions that they've held around chemical policy and their members have held on chemical policy is of concern to us. So they've been representing, in part, these very large corporations, but not all of them, right? A number of them have instituted incredible programs internally around driving, the greening of their company, from energy retrofits, to the way they're actually producing their products and their whole, supply chain, to the way that they're trying to reach out and educate the consumers to join them and sort of moving down these new directions. So we see a lot of movement in a lot of big companies as well. But when it's come to policy, the U.S. Chamber has been holding on to the old paradigm and the old way of doing business. So at any point in time, for us, it's not the interest in necessarily picking the fight with the chamber, but it's about what we want to bring to the American public and to the American businesses, is that there is another way of going about this, and that we can be on the cutting edge. We can be truly innovative and do what businesses do best in this country. The entrepreneurial spirit is at the heart of what we're talking about, the ability to be able to innovate, and that we believe that there's a way to be able to work with all these businesses, to work hand in hand with government, to be able to drive this new economy that will put many more people back to work and do less harm in the world at the same time. And so we have just come out at the other end, of these policy discussions with the U.S. Chamber and with a number of other related organizations like that. And what we're seeing is more and more businesses gravitating to the work that we're doing, the perspective that we're holding, broadening the set of issues that we're approaching, in order to be able to be a part of what they believe is the right direction to move this new economy.
Well, it sounds to me, David, and I think John might well agree here as well, that rather than being an opposition force to business and being in direct opposition to the Chamber of Commerce, what you are is maybe even an ancillary or an auxiliary or fresh approach to not only helping business reach out to the consumers, but also building that bridge, a new bridge, if you will, and restoring the American public's faith in big business.
And well, in all businesses, that's the key, is to be able to understand that there's the range of businesses that are out there that can offer a piece of the solution here. And it's not going to be just found in the very large corporations or, in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at the moment. And to the extent that any of those entities ever want to be able to work side by side in driving some of these innovations that many of our members are subscribing to, and many others out there that we haven't even tapped yet, are actually practicing, today through profitable businesses and business organizations, then we sort of welcome that partnership to drive this new economy.
David, how do people, there's a lot of people out there that listen to our show that are business owners, ecopreneurs, like just say, how do they get involved with your organization and join the cause or feel part of what you're doing?
Right. Well, there are a number of ways that businesses, come in on this. First, we have the level of the business organization. So if you belong to a business organization that's interested in this, then, come check out the website, come take a look, and you could sort of even download the basic application materials for how to join with us. But you'll take a look at the campaigns that we're operating on, the range from climate and energy to chemicals policy to fair elections to looking at the tax structure and the impact upon, small and mid-sized business owners, on and on to a whole set of other issues that are yet to come. Yeah? So you take a look at that. And then, so you can come in as a member at that level. Individual businesses, have come to support the council and come on as a business supporter. And in that case, you join up, you make a contribution to the council, but you can also then have, entree to be able to participate in any number of different working groups that we have on the specific issues. Or if you want to take a more passive role, then you'll have access to the latest updates on different policies, and with a simple click of a button, be able to sign on to support a particular campaign, and the like. So it could be, from a very armchair perspective to being able to step up and provide some leadership. We're constantly being called upon to provide new voices to the media, to write everything from writing op-eds to appearing on radio shows to the like. Everyone from the White House to others in Capitol Hill want to hear from business owners around the country. I think, it was quite clear with the president's address. He was pointing to the business owners that are doing phenomenal work out there in the country. Those stories are really important. So businesses joining with us and become a part of that flow of providing that new information of the different types of businesses we have out there, doing good work. So we've got a role from very passive to very engaged, from very small business to business associations as a way to actually engage with us and help us to tell that collective story. Because the individual work is important, but what's different about what the council is trying to do is by bringing all that together in a collective voice that highlights both the work that we're doing all together and the numbers that represents and the power that represents, but making sure that the individual stories and the individual associations, are built up as we build up the council. So that's a commitment that we made, is to rise all boats together, because that's how we're going to shift this economy.
David, we're down, unfortunately, to the last minute, and we're going to have you back because there's so much that you can share and enlighten our listeners with. But do you have any last thoughts as we leave today that you want to share with our listeners? Well,
I would just say, whether it's through the council or the like, whether you're, a business owner or there's businesses that you know of, then now's the moment. It's quite clear to us, in starting the council, that the receptivity to having a new set of business voices out there, businesses that are concerned about the planet and people, but also about, driving good businesses out there, making good financial sense in the work that they're doing, that's the voice that needs to be heard. And so we just encourage all of your listeners to step up as business leaders and be counted, to step up and reach out to the businesses that they know or they use and encourage them to get engaged. And whether it's through us or through our many different partners that we have, on the ground across the country, now's the time for a new business voice to be heard to help us drive a new, more sustainable economy.
Hey, David, Mike and I are so thankful for you spending some time with us today. We know you're very busy, but we love that closing remark. Now is the moment. And for those of you that want to really take that call to action and call to arms seriously, please go to David's great website, www.asbcouncil.org, and join the revolution. Join the American Sustainable Business Council. David Levine, you're a social ecopreneur, you're a great green leader, and you're a truly living proof that green is good.
This program will be available for downloading in a couple of days from our station's website, keyword podcast. Thanks for listening, and join us again next week at the same time for another edition of Green is Good.